I apologize in advance for the first 60 seconds of this podcast. After that, the audio quality is way better. Thanks for your support. This is episode number 412 of the InnerFight podcast. Welcome back to all of our regular listeners. And for those of you listening to the show for the first time, this is the Health and Fitness Podcast, the biggest podcast about health and fitness in the Middle East. Andre.
Yeah, man. It's been a long ride so far.
We should have like a medal for that. I was doing something on my Instagram a few weeks ago about participation medals.
Oh, God.
No, we shouldn't have a participation medal for that.
We should do a podcast on those.
We should do a podcast on those. Folks, big shout out to our sponsors, Smith Street Paleo, all the yummy food. If you're not on one of their meal plans and you live in Dubai or in Abu Dhabi, you should get on one. And if you're an international listener, you should come to Dubai and get one.
Yeah,
I was going to say we'll send you some food,
we'll ship you, but
that actually makes it a little bit tricky, doesn't it? Mate, first for us today, we have a guest on the line who's just been listening to absolute for the last minute or so. A guest on the line, Bridget Slocum from Australia, our first female cyclist.
Yep.
So we're going to jump in. Bridget, thanks a lot for joining us. Melbourne, Australia, all the way down there. How's things?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me on board.
Not at all, mate. It's random how we meet through one of our mutual friends and previous
podcast
superheroes. We were talking about this just before we came on the show. I think this is the most interesting thing, how we actually... Can you go through how we sort of connected and how Monty put us together? Because I think it's actually quite cool, and I think it's a lot about why we do the show and how people connect through sport, through health and fitness. So you hit it.
Yeah, so I met Monty down at the Party to Indoor Parties in Australia in January, which is the Tour Down Under in Adelaide. So the entire cycling community of Melbourne descends on Adelaide for a week and sort of fills up their coffee shops and takes up all the roads and annoys all the drivers immensely. And you ride all day and drink all night, and you occasionally watch the professional cyclists.
Really?
So Monty is working with a mate of mine, Ian, at another cycling brand, sort of running another party host, and I met him down at the Tour Down Under, and he said, "Hey, if you want to learn anything about me, listen to this podcast."
That's a pretty good hit-up line. That's a good icebreaker.
That's a good icebreaker. Don't speak to me right now. Just go and check out my podcast, and maybe we'll talk tomorrow.
He actually made me watch the video version as well.
Oh, really?
Did he say it was the most listened to show and stuff like that?
He did. He said Marcus told me it was the most popular podcast.
Oh my God. Folks, if you're wondering which show we're talking about, just hop back a few episodes. Podcast number 382, where we spoke Oasis, bikes, and life with Andrew Monty Montgomery, which, as Bridget said there, he's now working for Map Cycling Apparel. I want to jump back to what you just said, because that's something that the cycling festival down in Adelaide, the way you just put it sounds like the ultimate sort of sporting dream. If you're obviously into cycling, it sounds absolutely epic. You ride all day, have fun, drink coffee, and then drink other stuff in the evening.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any cyclists left in Melbourne in the third week of January. There's this, a teammate of mine couldn't go because of work commitments, and she signed out of social media for the week.
Really?
When you say teammate, is that like a professional team, or what kind of team do you ride for, or group, or whatever?
Yeah, so look, I ride for an amateur sort of local team. So we're sponsored by a local company called Black Sheep Cycling. And they've got a couple of teams around Australia, and they sort of hit us up with a free kit and an Instagram account and say, go on and,
go on.
Really
do free marketing.
Go on, pin a number on, do some races. But what they really want from us is to really create a positive image around women's racing and women's cycling. That's kind of the brief for us.
Well, let's talk about that. How did you get into cycling? Because I think women's cycling is something that's just coming so strong at the moment, and it's awesome to see.
I started cycling about 6 years ago. I was sort of doing, I don't know if you have them in Dubai, we have these spin classes at the gym.
We got those.
And the instructor goes, man, you're really strong. You should do this thing called Around the Bay. And at the time I thought I was so cool, like signing up to do Around the Bay. It's a 240-kilometre ride that sort of goes around the bay of Victoria. And, now nobody who actually rides bikes in Australia tends to actually do the Around the Bay. It's what we call, the Hubbards ride. And you get a lot of kind of super fluoro and, rear view mirrors. But it was quite an achievement for me at the time. I had a very sore bottom at the end of it. And
240 kilometers, that's a pretty solid ride, huh?
Yeah, but it's pretty much dead flat. And it's on the sort of what we call the beach road, which is the road that everybody kind of rides on if they don't like hills. And but yeah, it's a really good entry kind of Grand Fondo ride. And did that for the first year and then swore I'd never do it again. And I was really lucky to meet a girlfriend who had previously raced track for the Commonwealth Games but hadn't ridden for a few years. And she sort of, I was fit and didn't know what to do. I was a self-confessed Hubbard. And she was unfit and was a very, very good bike rider. So I helped her get fit and she helped me learn how to ride a bike.
Wow. What is the barrier of entry for cycling? Obviously you need a bike, but how much do you need to invest? And because I think a lot of people I think biking is super cool, but I don't really know how much should I invest and how many times a week should you ride, and how do you get connected with people, etc.
Yeah, look, I think it's very easy to spend a lot of money on bikes. You can spend spend $300 on a bike, or you can spend 20 grand on a bike.
Yeah.
I think the advice I'd say for anyone getting into cycling is don't spend too much money to start with. Get a second-hand bike or borrow a bike, or start entry level and see if it's something you're into. The other thing with apparel, there's a lot of brands out there that are doing amazing things and making really beautiful technical clothing. But again, if you're just starting out, you don't need the latest and best clothing. You don't need to spend money to actually get on a bicycle. It's effectively a mode of transport.
It does make you look really cool, though, if you
fashion,
have a super flash bike and really sick lycra.
Purple socks. And
yeah, I think when I started cycling, I was up to 24 pairs of socks. Monty actually stitched me right up, but that's a whole other story. But
well, he's in the sales industry.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing.
But look, I think there's, in answer to your question, what makes a cyclist? You don't have to be racing 2 or 3 times a week, like we do over the summer, and riding every day to be a cyclist. You can ride once a week. You can ride, slow. You can ride on beach road. You can ride a $20,000 bike or ride a $500 bike, and there isn't really a barrier to entry other than just getting on a bicycle.
Yeah. I think that's one of the nice things, and that's what we sort of wanted to link a little bit to as well. This whole concept, which actually was a little bit alien to me, of coffee ride. And I remember when I first started riding, these guys come for a coffee ride. I'm like, what the hell is that? They're like, we're going to ride. It was in Dubai, so they ride from the bottom of the stick. They ride to Bab al Shams, which is only about 30k, and then we have coffee, and some guys have a croissant and pancakes, and then we ride back. And I was like, why would I want to do that? I don't know. But it started, and I guess, and down in Australia, and especially in Melbourne, the coffee culture is huge. So is it something that's really social as well, and provides a nice community on that level for you guys down there?
Yeah, absolutely. We have coffee rides. We also have shop rides. So most local bike shops will run a weekly ride as well.
Right.
That generally ends in coffee at a coffee shop. But there's sort of the coffee ride is generally a Friday morning here.
Right.
So, everyone will do their serious training in the, midweek. There'll be a coffee ride on Friday where we sort of just have a cruisy ride. We call them the short ride long coffees, which is hashtag SRLC.
SRLC, okay.
So you do like a 25k ride and then pull up to the coffee shop, and then you're sort of rested for racing on the weekend, or if you're going off on a long adventure.
Yeah.
And those rides are certainly a great place to not only meet other cyclists, but also get a lot of Instagram photos if that's your thing.
Absolutely.
We have a little Facebook group in Melbourne called Girl Ride Melbourne.
Right.
And there's probably about 400 members in the group. And we have this Friday coffee ride that was started by this wonderful woman, Kaz Whitehead.
Right.
She designed the route. She put the map up on the Facebook group, and any females allowed to come along. There's a start and an end point, and we all have coffee at the end point. And regardless of how fast or slow you are, there'll be someone there who's riding at your pace, and there's coffee at the end, which is
Do you think
it's a really nice environment
to sort of build more of a cycling community than before? Because I know previously when that concept wasn't around, you'd sort of join a cycling group, you'd get spat out the back after like 5 minutes if you were lucky, and you'd never see the guys again, and then you'd find another cycling group sort of the next week. But if you're waiting
slower.
yeah, exactly, quite a lot slower. But if you're sort of so it sort of seems to have bred quite a more of a community feel to things, whilst also people at the topper end of your group can, they can hit the gas and we'll all see each other at the coffee shop.
Yeah, look, I think that's definitely the case. And also, we're all so tired because we get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to ride, and everyone just wants coffee afterwards.
Yeah, right.
So it's a common bond that if you're a cyclist, you're going to be sleep deprived, and you're definitely going to be addicted to caffeine. So it's a nice common denominator and something to talk about.
Right.
But it's funny that it's only starting now. You know what I mean? Like back 20 years ago, would people do this?
I don't know.
Is it because of seeing sports nowadays, like CrossFit becoming such a community sport? They're like, oh shit, this community thing, like that can really pick up. Why don't we create coffee rides and whatever?
Yeah. I don't know. What do you think, Bridget?
I think they used to really centre around clubs more often. The clubs today are really just the kind of legal connection that you have to get a racing license, because you have to be affiliated with the club to get a racing license. I think it used to be that formalistic club culture, whereas now there's these sort of groups that hone around bike shops or hone around coffee shops or around Facebook groups on social media, or it's just a new way to connect with people.
Yeah. I think as well, mate. I remember when I was racing mountain bikes at school, we used to go out training, and we literally, it was so cold. This is why we went, but it'd be so cold that we'd pull in the UK in the big, you sort of have big national parks, and you have a National Trust cafe, which is almost like it's part of the park. So you used to get like a cup of tea and a bun for basically like £2, like a couple of euros or something like that, and we were so damn cold that we'd always pull in. So maybe it's actually not such a new concept. Before we were pulling in to save our lives, but now they're sort of pulling in to create this thing around community. I think you're right, man. I think a lot of sports have gone a little bit more sort of community driven, and cycling's the same, because cycling, and I'm sure you'll have some thoughts on this, Bridget, cycling can be quite a lonely sport because everyone is so different. Some people are better at climbing, some people are good on the flats, so to actually get good training with people, and it's quite an individual sport to a certain extent, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I think it is. Obviously, when you race, there's team dynamics, but it is largely an individual sport, and you're right, everybody has their own strengths and their own training programs, so I guess that's, why everybody sort of seems to, there'll be a particular ride that has a particular focus, and you'll go on that particular ride and you'll know that you're going to get spat out the back. Whereas on a Friday, that you'll go on a particular ride and you might not get spat out the back, and you'll sit around and have an hour-long coffee at the end of it.
Yeah, so it makes it, it's different, and I think that's giving people sort of different reasons and motivation for getting into it. Let's keep that thought. After you did your 230 initial ride and wound up with quite a sore bottom, probably woke up the next morning walking a little bit funny. How did your cycling story start to unfold after that?
Well, I think, I joined a Friday coffee ride. And as I say, you just start meeting new people. Like every ride you go on, you meet a new person. And I just happened to have this small community of people who knew what racing was about and said, hey, you're actually kind of strong. You should try this racing caper. And I remember going out. Our winter road season is it's really cold. Like all the races are held.
Australia.
They're held. Yeah. So we have
Andre's from Denmark.
I'm from Scandinavia.
They think that Australia is hot 24/7. They think it's just an oven.
So over the summer we have criteriums. So they're my favourite kind of races. They're like an hour at full gas with a sprint at the end.
Okay.
And you could be racing in 40 degrees in crit season. And that's when all the pros come home as well. So we have all the nationals and, the big UCI races down here. Then when the plebs get to do their road season, is generally between April and November.
Yep.
And, the further you get out of Melbourne, the colder it gets. So you go out to these like towns an hour or so out of Melbourne and it's like 1 or 2 degrees, there's frost on the ground, and you're lining up on the start line going, why am I not in bed? Why am I signing up to race like 90 kilometres at full gas?
Wow.
So I was pretty unsuspecting when I went out there the first time, and there was about 4 women lined up in this race, and my friend said, "Oh, come on, you should do it." And you just get the bug, and I think with cycling you either like it or you love it or you don't, and you start racing and you either get that kind of competitive bug of saying, "Hey, I got dropped today. Tomorrow I want to." The next race I want to finish, and then, hey, I came 4th, I really want to get on the podium next time, and then you're on the podium and you go, hey, I want to stand on the top step,
But what is it exactly in cycling like that attracts people so much? Because it sounds so lonely. It's like, for me, it sounds like swimming.
This is why I need you, Bridget, because these guys do not get it.
It's lonely, but it's the most isolated sport within a social context. You could be on this like
3
or 4 hour race. It's 2 degrees out. All the people around you are trying to shell you out the back. But there's just this, I don't know, there's this magic about it, and it's really good fun. And I often describe it sometimes as like being on a roller coaster and burning calories while you're doing it. Like you get to have the fun of like. Especially if you're mountain biking or racing cross, you get to have the fun of being on a bicycle and, feeling the wind in your face and kind of descending down mountains and, but then you're actually working for the pleasure as well.
Yeah, and I think that's actually why a lot of, we're seeing it over here in the Middle East as I would say an alternative midlife crisis to spunking a load of cash on a Ferrari or on a massive golf course membership where, on the golf course here, every 3 or 4 holes, they have a bar. So guys will go out and play golf and end up having maybe, 8 beers. And you sort of, your heart rate is elevated, and it can be elevated to an incredibly high level if you decide it. And I think something you've touched on there, Bridget, as well, is that it's quite addictive. You get spat out the back on your first ride and you're like, well, I don't want that to happen again, because as human beings, we're all quite competitive, aren't we? So, and then it's like, oh, I actually finished in the bunch today. Oh, I was actually up at the top. And I think that's even, it's a lot more, obviously you've done a lot of road racing, but even when I'm riding with my mates, I still want to smash them in the last K. It's, so I think that's actually what brings it something quite unique as well, is that
it's very easy to progress.
It's easy to progress,
track
right?
it.
Yeah, and it's sort of, and it's fun as well, because like you said, Bridget, maybe we'll get into a little bit of the team racing. Like the team racing tactics are something that is like, it's like chess in a way, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about your experience in team racing.
It's really hard to explain how cycling teams work, but I'll give you an example from a criterium race. So in a criterium race, it's an hour at full gas, and there's going to be attacks off the front. You want your sprinter there for the sprint points, and you want your sprinter there for the finish line. So your teammates, while they're in the race for themselves, they're also going to protect the sprinter in a criterium race to make sure that, if the sprinter gets dropped, someone might go back and get them. But even, there might be a false attack off the front to make other people tired, and the sprinter can sit in and do not much work for a while everyone's off having an attack, knowing that the bunch will bring it back. And so there's all these what we call kind of fake attacks, or you have a crystal pedal off the front, which is sort of like you look like you're having an attack, but you're not really having an attack. And there's a sort of thing of, if you're sitting on the front of a bunch, you're doing most of the work. So if one of your teammates who's good at a time trial, for example, if they get away in a break with one or two people and their teammates on the front of the bunch, their teammate's going to sit up and just say, you know what, I'm not dragging this bunch up to my teammate in the breakaway. I'm going to let her have a fair crack in that breakaway. And if somebody else wants to pull a bunch of 30 other riders up to that breakaway, it's going to be somebody who's not in the team.
Yeah, right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you guys kind of can slow down the bunch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you effectively slow down the bunch because you sit on the front with the brakes on. And, you're on the front. So they generally say if you're on the front, you're working 30% harder than the person behind you.
Yeah.
Really?
So, so the guy sitting behind you is saying, well, I don't want to do any work. I'm going to let you pull me up to the brake.
Yeah.
And sit here and have, a 70% effort. But if the person on the front isn't actually trying because their mate's in the breakaway, it's going to be somebody from the bunch who's going to have to come around and do the work and pull the bunch back to the break by themselves. And so there's always this sort of, as you say, Mark, it's a chess game about, okay, well, what rider is going to bury themselves working 30% harder than the rest of the bunch to pull 30 people up to a break and then be too tired for the sprint or the next attack?
It's brutal, isn't it?
So that's sometimes why you want to have a team, because you might have a team member who's like, well, I know I'll never be there in a sprint finish, but I'll do a whole lot of that work to make sure that our teammates who are specialists in the sprint are there in the end. And then when you get into the winter road race season, the sprinters might protect the climbers until they get to the bottom of the hill and then literally sit up and let the climbers take the win up the hill.
But it's the same as well on a climb. You might have one climber in your team who is there to set the pace, so he'll murder himself for the first 8Ks of a 10K climb, and he's literally gassed out at 8K, and then the team will come through. You see it a lot, obviously. Well, Chris Froome's different because he takes drugs, but it's and that's something we want to talk about. But last year's Tour de France, Landa just used to sit on the front for Chris Froome till somewhere about 1K or 2K to go, and actually Landa was still fresh, but they didn't let him win. But that's also a whole other story. But so it's quite. So what's your specialty then, Bridget? What are you, a sprinter? Tell us a little bit about what you do the best.
Well, I weigh 70 kilos, so I'm definitely a sprinter. So I love climbing hills, but I don't profess to be a climber. So my favourite discipline is crits and sprinting and mountain bike and CX over the winter. And as I say, I take part in road racing over the winter.
Yeah.
It's certainly not my specialty, but I just love that adrenaline and aggression that you get in the final sprint, and I love the chess games and the crit. It's great fun.
It's good fun
for non-cyclists. Like, this is like super surprising that there's so much strategy and whole team. Like, I never really thought about the whole team part of it, but now it sort of makes sense when you mention Chris Froome and all those. Like, I also watched Tour de France, but I don't really understand like how it kind of works with all the teams. And all right, this guy always wins, but his teammates never get to win, but the team sort of wins still.
Yeah.
Like,
I still don't really understand. It takes years to understand how something like the Tour de France works. So I wouldn't beat yourself up about it. There's still bits that I sort of sit there and go, how did that happen? You've got to watch years and years and years of the Grand Tours to kind of get it.
Yeah, that's why I was lucky. Dad used to make me watch Tour de France from when I was about 9.
Okay, well.
Yeah.
I kind of get a bit of a grip on it. But that's also why cycling is quite an interesting sport for everyone. And that's actually why I'm really enjoying, even over here we have quite a few female amateur cycling teams coming through. The guys at Wolfies have one, and the girls there are super strong. We actually train a couple of the girls from that team. And it's awesome because they're all so different. And I think that's one of the greatest things as well. Like you said, Bridget, like there's all sorts of different people within a team, so we can be it's almost like a soccer team where, you've got a good goalkeeper, you've got a striker, you've got a midfield player, we'd have a climber, we'd have a sprinter, we'd have a guy that in the team or a girl in the team that can just sit on the front for 2 hours and just murder themselves, just to kill everyone else, basically. So
no matter how you're built, or you can get into cycling.
You can, mate. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that's super. That's why it's exploding. Have you seen? You've been in cycling sort of for the last 6 or so years down in Australia, Bridget. Have you seen a massive explosion of cycling for both genders in the last few years?
Yeah, I have, but particularly with women. That they say down here, they've got the saying that says cycling is the new golf.
Yeah.
And that it is that way for, the middle-aged businessmen to make contacts now, and it is the way that, young people kind of get together on the weekend and play sport.
Yeah,
nice. And and maybe it's a result of, the cool kits and social media presence and everything, but it just seems like it's not, these dorks riding around in lycra on the roads getting in everyone's way anymore, and that it's actually, it's an accepted part of the community, and, it's a really cool sport to be part of.
It's really fun to see that. Like, now you see skinny dudes, like, rocking up with a self-confidence like a bodybuilder, like, in those really tight pants, and like 10 years ago, I would just be like,
"What are you doing?
You can't carry yourself like that, man. Like, to even live." And now it's like, how many watts can you put out for like 1 hour, buddy?
Yeah. Exactly. I took my best friend to a Rafa clubhouse for a cup of coffee, and we just happened to be there in what I call civvies, so normal clothes at the time when a bunch ride had finished. And she literally said to me, she's like, "Bridget, there are all these men basically naked in here. Like, what are we doing? Like, why are they walking around a cafe naked?"
Yeah.
It's just a thing.
It's quite strange, but I think as you've alluded to a couple of times there, Bridget, like the style of the lycra that's coming out now, and your team has like a really cool Instagram page, and anyone who's listening in, Black Sheep Steiner, go and check these girls out. Their Instagram page, and that's actually what I asked Bridget before we started recording. I was like, "Are you guys a pro team?" And she goes, "No, we look very good on Instagram," which they do. But your kit looks so cool. Yeah. The photos are so cool. And I think for anyone that was potentially wanting to get into this sport, they'd be like, "Yeah, this is cool." And there's hot chicks as well. Like, how good. But I think it's true what you said as well, Andre. Like, I think before we'd look maybe a little bit at cyclists and go, "Look at that skinny dude." But I think now that we're less ignorant than we were before, and we understand sort of what it feels like to have your heart rate at 95% of your max for 1 hour, or what it feels like to put out. Yeah, exactly. I think there's a real newfound respect for these guys. Yeah. And I mean, when I started cycling, road cycling 3 or 4 years ago, I got quite humbled as well. I was like, these guys really, like, what's going to happen? Like, you know me, I work out, you know what I mean?
That's twice your size, man.
And then I started falling off, and I'm like, wow, and they can take, and I think that's one of the craziest things. And I can't remember someone's one bike book I was reading recently. It'll come to me soon. And they're like, this guy painted it in that way, and he said, and these guys fall off often, and the number of broken bones in cycling is pretty much more than most sports out there. And
well, I think you and I actually started talking because I had the same injury as you about 4 years ago.
That's right.
Lots of broken bones.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, it is absolutely crazy the way it goes. One thing that we did touch on there, and I'm keen to get your thoughts on, because I like the way that you say it straight, Bridget, is drugs in cycling. We've seen a lot. We saw Lance Armstrong. We saw, back in the day, 1967 on 112, Simpson died from having too much recreational drugs in his system. We've now got Froome on charges. Basically, we've got Wiggins on charges, previous Tour de France winners, British athletes and icons. What's your thoughts about drugs in cycling to start with?
I do say it like it is, and I'll say it's starting to bore me because it's just it's a boring topic because there's too much of it. But look, I think it's a result of the fact that it is a professional sport. Yeah. There's money in it, there's sponsors in it. The teams are wanting to be the best of the best, and they want to push that human condition, beyond what it's naturally capable of. And, the gains on a 3-week race, when the difference between first and second over 3 weeks and how many thousands of kilometres in the Tour de France can come down to 4 seconds, having that extra, half a watt per kilogram for 2 days might make all the difference.
Yeah, right.
So I think it's unfortunate. I'm not sure it's ever going to go anywhere because cycling at that top level, and especially in the Grand Tours, just demands something from the human body that is not it's not natural.
Yeah. Well, they're unable to do it naturally, and I think that's why it started back in the day with recreational drugs, right?
Well, I think they used to take, cocaine and speed and stuff just to get
Yeah, absolutely. And also alcohol. I think a lot of the sort of the early Tour de France's were fueled by alcohol, by these guys picking up a drink along the way. And then
carb-loading.
Basically, and then getting hold when they sort of did a post-mortem on Simpson after he died on Mont Ventoux. They said essentially he had drugs, recreational drugs, in his cycling jersey, and I think one of the reasons, I have to maybe check a little bit in Google to find out the exact reason why he died, but his stomach basically just sort of caved in from having so much drugs inside it. So yeah, true story, man. And that's 1967. So that's why also I'm a little bit alarmed that people are going today, do you think Wiggins took drugs? Like, another story's come out. Yes, I do think Wiggins took drugs. Like, whether he used, and that's where the sort of grey line is, or the fine line is, this therapeutic use exemptions. What's your thoughts on that, Bridget?
What's a drug and what's a vitamin?
Yeah. What do you think? Do you think they should be allowed, or do you think what's the story?
Look, I think the problem is that, it's like any drug. The laws are only going to catch up years beyond the product coming onto the street. Yeah. So, in an ideal world, athletes, I think, could be tested and, could be clean. But when you have people, again, who are driving for gains and driving for success, and, with technological advancements, they're always going to stay ahead of the rules.
Of what's going on.
And, what is a drug? Is a drug something that is, a formulation that's not currently illegal?
Yeah.
It's a bit heartbreaking, but I think it's the reality of the sport.
What do you see? Do you see, or do you want to speak about, if you don't know, problem on an amateur level in Australian cyclists? Do you see, or do you feel there's much use of banned substances?
Look, I don't think so. There's certainly a lot of people who race for sheep stations.
Yeah.
Do you know what that saying means?
No.
Andre definitely doesn't. My wife's Australian, so
I'm out.
Yeah. It's the sort of thing where you say, look, we're at a Saturday morning Criterium, racing for $50, but you would have thought you were racing for the Paris-Roubaix. Like it's,
I know those people.
So it's that thing where everybody's got the gear, and when I mean the gear, I mean the bikes and wheels, and and there's attitude, and there's a lot of competition, and a lot of people take their racing very, very seriously. But I think most people are pretty sensible about it, and they know that cycling isn't their professional life. And if you take those kind of substances, you're probably going to compromise the rest of your life.
I think that's what makes me saddest. I think maybe, I don't know, within the Middle East, but I do sense that in certain sports that are quite amateur, or certain amateur races globally, there is an increase in the use of drugs, which I think is a more of a waterfall effect from the professionals, because people are looking up to these pros and they're like, well, they're using it, why can't I use it?
In any sport.
Any sport, yeah. It's very sad. Let's look a little bit to the bigger picture here. We still see only really globally male cyclists covered. I could not tell you through my ignorance probably, I couldn't tell you who the best female cyclist in the world is. What's your thoughts on that, and where's it going to go? Is it, is women's cycling, is there any chance it's going to catch up to males? Are we going to see more coverage of a female Tour de France? I don't even know if there is one. Again, excuse my ignorance on that.
Look, how do I feel? I feel really positive about it at the moment. I don't think women's cycling will, or any women's sport will ever be equal in men's sport, because it's not the way the world works. But right now at the moment, you've got the Time's Up and the Me Too campaigns that they're getting a lot of press. You've got a recognition that like the lack of women at the top of on boards and the top of industries is not through a lack of talent in the women in the pool of women, that it's through it's through the structure of any profession, and I think there's a recognition flowing through to professional sport of that as well. There's this changing definition of in my own profession, there's this changing definition of what makes a good lawyer. So it used to be a tall man with a big voice and grey hair and pot belly, and now it's now people are accepting that you can be a good lawyer if you're a female. And I think that there's been a bit of an attitudinal shift, and it's still got a bloody long way to go. But you're starting to see that female professional cyclists are becoming marketable products, because effectively professional sport is all about, can you market this athlete so sponsors can make money out of it. I talked before about the Tour Down Under. We had the women's Tour Down Under here sort of the days before the men's Tour Down Under. And it was a really exciting race. Like, it was more exciting than the men's race. And they announced at the end of the Tour Down Under that next year they're going to have equal prize money for the women's race as the men's race. Which is awesome. And, like, my local cricket that I do every Saturday morning has the same thing. If you win an A-grade women's cricket, you get $80, just like the man who wins the A-grade men's cricket.
That's very
I think, that kind of thing is what encourages that shift in the paradigm of, these women are like boss ladies. If you watch some of these professional women races, and it's really hard to find them. You've got to find them on YouTube channels. But we have this sort of underground network of women on social media, sharing stuff. Here's the YouTube channel to watch this, this women's race that's going on this weekend, and everyone gets behind it and really is starting to kind of get a following of these women. And I think the explosion of Instagram and social media over the last few years has meant that female cyclists can actually, I guess, market themselves as professionals and have their sponsors market them so that they are seen by the wider population who isn't going to go mining around for a YouTube channel to watch a race. And you asked about the Tour de France as well. So this year they had a women's Tour de France, and it was a 2-stage tour.
Is that the first time?
Sorry?
Is that the first time they have a Tour de France for women?
I think so. So they had sort of a one-day race last year, and I'm not sure of the history of that, but this year they sort of had a two-day race, and it finished on one of the mountains that the men's stage finished on or went through that same day, so that there was the caravan was already up there and so forth. And the women who fought up Bloody Mountain, it was a really, really exciting race. It was a mountaintop finish, and it just is going to take people to start sitting up and saying, hey, the definition of what makes a professional sports person that I want to watch, it can change, and it is changing.
I think people like yourselves, like, in cycling and involved in it and promoting it and that, I think that sort of gathers the momentum. And I also think you came up with a really good point there, is that the way that we actually consume content has changed a lot, and going forward it might just be that YouTube link that will, and that YouTube link will spread further on social media, and we'll get a lot more people watching a women's race, because it doesn't, like it or not, a women's race doesn't attract the sponsors that, your sort of Sky team attracts at the moment. And I think you're right. I think it's going to be a long time before it catches up. But I for one would be super interested to watch a women's bike race.
Yeah.
It's we actually did World Championships in Qatar last year. We went to watch the men because it was split over 2 days. But Monty, again, he was there for the women's race. He said it was a great race. So yeah,
well, I'm sure he was there for the race itself.
Yeah, not for the women. Yeah, we'll see.
He's really passionate about cycling.
And and everything that goes with it, the Thai stuff. But anyway, we're pretty much out of time there. That is a lot of super inspiring information, Bridget. You're inspiring for what you're doing and sort of getting involved in cycling. And I think, you know, I've had the similar conversation that we've just had with a lot of people about why cycling is special and how it becomes addictive. But the way that you put it across there, I'm sure, is going to inspire and motivate quite a few people to perhaps, you know, trade up the sweaty gym T-shirt for a nice bit of lycra.
Yeah.
Andre, you?
Yeah, I hope so.
I actually have bike uniform.
Bike uniform.
Or whatever it's called.
I
I have like one of those map, whatever.
Yeah,
like,
you have some
dude, it's
back
like
here.
1,000 dirhams.
Yeah.
And socks.
Monty sold it to you.
He sold me the socks too.
How many pairs of socks did he sell you?
Yeah, a few. Yeah, it's actually quite funny because one day he brought in some of his old cycling jerseys and gave them to Carmen,
Oh yeah.
who's one of our coaches, and they didn't fit her.
No, too small.
Yeah, they're a little bit too small. Poor old Monty. He was actually the guy that just used to turn up every morning. He used to cycle because the bike shop's quite close to the gym here, and he'd cycle in from his house and just come in for a shower, and he'd be the guy that'd stand at the door, all sort of 65 kilos of him.
Max.
On a fat day.
In his lycra, chest pumped out, whilst everyone else is just lifting barbells and twice the size of him and just didn't care at all. So that's good times, Bridget. We really appreciate you taking the time out to speak to us. Very inspiring, as I said, what you're doing. And people, I suggest you check Bridget out on her Instagram. This is right, BESNZ?
Correct.
And then over at Black Sheep Steiner, STINNER is her team. If nothing else, like we've said a couple of times, they are nice-looking girls and they're wearing lycra. You guys should definitely go and check it out. And some of you girls should definitely go and... We sound a little bit perverse there as well. That's probably against iTunes policy, but who cares? Mate, you actually inspired me to come down for that festival down in Adelaide, drink coffee, ride a bike in the day, and maybe party a bit at night. Dre, you in?
Yeah.
When is it? Is it
well,
like January? So it's even good weather as well.
The third week of January. You've got to do it.
There we go. We might have to do it. Might have to make that a trip for next year. We'll see.
Excellent.
Bridget,
Excellent.
thank you so much for your time, sweetheart. We will keep in touch and we'll follow your progress, and all the best.
Thank you. See you
Thanks a
soon.
lot.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.